Hello, podcast listener. This is Gordon, JJ Gordon. And in this episode of JJ Meets World, we welcome back previous guest Phil Lund, and we talk about the Daniel Craig James Bond movies, how Daniel Craig got to be Bond, insight into the production, and whether or not we like certain aspects in this, all leading up to the release of No Time to Die coming up in the not too distant future. So we don't cover that one, but you get all of the other great Bond stuff in this one episode. Plus, Tucker and I, we muse about missing the movie theater a little bit. All of this and so much more on today's episode of JJ Meets World. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. This episode of JJ Meets World is brought to you by Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. Natalie has a proven track record to get your home sold faster and for more money. She is consistently focused on her clients' needs and wants throughout the entire process and make sure that they are well taken care of. If you're looking to buy or sell, reach out to Natalie today. On average, Natalie sells a home every 3.74 days. That's at least 2 a week. And last year, Natalie earned her clients on average over $4,000 above list price on their homes. And you don't have to take our word for it. Here's some of the great reviews Natalie has received. I was overwhelmingly impressed with Natalie and all the Hatch team. She was very responsive and responded to all of the emails within an hour. She gave great advice and encouragement from the listing and pictures, the offer, and all the closing details. The marketing team knew exactly how to promote my property, and I was pleased by how soon and easily my property received an offer. I was actually dreading selling my condo, and Natalie did such an awesome job that I felt like I really didn't need to do anything. The thing I most appreciated was that she really listened to what I wanted to do and respected my decisions. I would definitely recommend Natalie and all the Hatch Realty team. They made this process so wonderful. That was from Diane. So listen, if you're in the mood to buy or sell a home, give Natalie a call right now. You can reach her at 701-388-9338. Natalie, Natalie, at hatchrealtyfm.com, or you can go to livefargomoorhead.com. That's livefargomoorhead.com and find out some information. Huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. JJ Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. JJ has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
There is something special about going to a movie, in my opinion. It's a group experience, and when the lights go down, you're all in the same boat. It doesn't matter if you're a millionaire or you are using the last part of your paycheck to get into this movie. We're all in the same boat. We're all sitting in the same theater, watching the same thing, having the same timeline experience. And I miss going to movies more than anything during the pandemic. It is the thing that I wish the most that I could get back to, is going out to see a movie. Luckily, our local theaters have done things like pre-popped popcorn that you can purchase to give you a little bit more of that experience, but it just is not the same. And some of my favorite movies of all time are now retro series movies, and so I'm getting to experience them on the big screen, and I noticed stuff I had never noticed before. I remember seeing National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation on the big screen and noticing some just hidden jokes that I hadn't seen before, some Wally World references that when you're watching on your TV, you just don't see because they're not as big when they're not on the giant screen. And one of my all-time favorite film series is the James Bond film series, and this episode of JJ Meets World features our special guest, Phil Lund. He's previously been on the JJ Meets World podcast before, but we break down the Daniel Craig James Bond films. You get some great history of what it took to get that. You get a lot of stuff about the movies, and also, spoiler alert, if you have not seen these movies and you are interested in watching them with a fresh perspective, do do not listen to the rest of this podcast.
JJ, between you and Greg Carlson are probably the two people that I know that have watched the most movies just in general. You both are very regular movie consumers. And so my question to you then is that because you don't have access to the the movie theaters themselves, have you been watching even more movies to try to scratch that itch, or do you feel like you're still keeping the same kind of pace and schedule of movie watching? It just happens that it's all happening within your home now.
That's basically what it is. And I'll note this. There used to be more movies made and released on the big screen every year than there are right now. I think it costs so much to get a movie made and then to get it publicized that we're not seeing the release schedule that we used to. And, like one movie takes one date and nothing wants to open against it because
right. Well,
you don't want to have to split a box office.
Right. And you've got, companies like Walt Disney that basically can completely dictate the terms to movie theaters about what movies show when and for how long. So there's not like the same kind of tension that there used to be between the movie theater chains and the movie production houses. And because, the movies are still doing what they're doing, but the theater chains are competing with online resources. Because even though you can't recreate the feeling you get at a movie theater with Netflix, that doesn't mean that so many people aren't already just opting to go the Netflix route anyways. Right. So it's just I love movie theaters. I love going to movies when there's a movie I want to see. But I feel like they're going to exist forever on some level. But I really wonder what the future of movie theaters is going to be like, especially after the pandemic. How many smaller chains are going to have to shutter or just sell what they have to the larger chains?
If there's one thing I hope, it's that we go back to one of the ways movie theaters used to work, which is that you don't have the same movie showing on 9 screens. Mm-hmm. I remember it was a big deal to have a movie like in Fargo, especially where we have only a handful of movie theaters, where if one movie was playing at one theater, it wasn't playing at any of the other theaters.
Right.
And now you
might even go ahead.
I was gonna say, and it's only on one screen at that theater.
Right. And they may have to also offer things like for smaller audiences that would be interested in it, like, hey, we're showing this one movie that hasn't been shown in theaters for a while, and it's on a film print, and it's not coming through a digital projection. Like they might have to find more ways to kind of make themselves seem more, I don't know what the right word is here, boutique like, or it's going to be for a small audience that's interested in seeing this, but we can offer something that you literally can't get on Netflix or at a big chain that's only doing digital projectors. I don't know. Maybe they'll have to do stuff like that, but I just hope that they're able to find a happy medium where they can kind of dictate their own future and not be subject to the whim of these giant corporations that make the majority of the blockbusters we see now.
Yeah, we're going to see, I think, a big change. I think, all these major studios are pausing their productions right now. And so there's going to be this weird calendar where they don't have movies ready to go. And so things that have been sitting on a shelf for 3 or 4 years that they didn't know how to release or when to release are going to get pulled up and brought out. So there's some interesting aspects, I think, there, but it'll never be the same. No matter what, when people start going to movies again, it'll never be the same as it was before. So we want to give you a little bit of a fun run with this. We break down all the Daniel Craig Bonds. I think you're going to enjoy it. I know that right now I'm itching to fire up my DVD player and watch some Bond movies just after this discussion. I want to go back and rewatch some of them. So without further ado, our special guest is Phil Lund, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World where we break down all of the Daniel Craig Bond movies.
JJ Meets World.
Thanksgiving weekend 2002. Die Another Day, the last, as it turns out to be, James Bond film featuring Pierce Brosnan as the lead, hits theaters, and it does fairly well, but not nearly as well as they wanted. You might remember this is the movie where they wanted to spin off Halle Berry's character Jinx and give her a brand new like female Bond, but with the CIA type feeling. And afterwards, there wasn't an immediate cry for a new James Bond movie, which is sort of unheard of when you think of this series. It's one of the most popular series. In fact, I think it's like $19.9 billion is the estimated value of the James Bond series. And we wait a few years and then we get the Daniel Craig series, which is what we're talking about here today. And welcome to the virtual studio, Phil Lund, previous guest and huge James Bond fan. How you doing, Phil?
I'm doing wonderful.
So Phil is one of the people who I found in high school had an affinity for James Bond the same way I did. Phil, could you just quickly tell us a little bit about your history with James Bond?
Probably a lot like everybody's. I watched it with both my grandpas, my dad, and uncles, and everyone else. They were just all obsessed with it. And then I think it was the cool thing to watch. I remember, I think it was on actually Thanksgiving. Was it over Thanksgiving when TNT or TBS would run like the 7 days of Bond?
Oh yeah, that's where I would learn about like Roger Moore, because that's where you'd get like, you know, Jaws and like all of that's where kind of James Bond almost achieved superhero level universe building, because there was all this crazy stuff that they would do with Bond, Moonraker, and those movies. So like that was how I got first introduced to Bond, was Roger Moore, those TV marathons. I'd watch them with my dad. Real good for male bonding.
Yeah. The marathons were popular enough that they actually have references in other types of media. For example, if you remember in the movie American Beauty, when they're driving to watch their daughter in like a cheer competition, Kevin Spacey makes note, like, I hope this doesn't take too long. There's a James Bond marathon on tonight. And I think we got used to that. It became, like Phil said, an annual event where you watched these James Bond movies, and it was, you know, they had enough to fill 24 hours, and then they had enough to fill 48 hours. And so James Bond kind of had this magical place in so many people's hearts. And new generations seem to love Bond as much as old generations. It wasn't like Westerns necessarily, where, you know, kids necessarily wouldn't get into True Grit. It was hard for them to, you know, get past the John Wayne of it all. And James Bond doesn't have that. For whatever reason, it seems to stay fresh. So this particular podcast, we're going to focus on the Daniel Craig James Bond series. Now, a couple items of note is when we originally came up with this idea, it was going to be released on the same day as No Time to Die, the most recent, as of this time of recording, James Bond film. But because of the coronavirus pandemic, they have now pushed the release date later on. So we'll have this fun retrospective and people can listen to this and then go see No Time to Die. Here is an important piece that I think people need to know right off the bat. I think that possibly two of the best Bond movies in the entire franchise are Daniel Craig Bonds. For me personally, I think Skyfall is just barely not my favorite Bond film of all time. It's a movie I can watch over and over and over and over again. And then Casino Royale, I also think, is one that just is a great introduction to this character for so many people. I know Phil and I try and make it to a Bond movie when we have the chance. I think what Bond movie did we start doing this with, Phil? Was it the one that that Denise Richards was in when we were still in high school?
I think we saw, it was definitely in high school, and it was right in the heart of the Pierce Brosnan era, for sure. So it was Denise Richards as Christmas Jones, I think was probably what it was.
And I remember when we heard that name. Yeah, when we heard that, I was like, oh my God, I know a line that I would write for this. And then it was actually in the movie, which is Christmas Comes Early this year. And oh boy.
I think, like, before we talk about Casino Royale or Daniel Craig, we just have to like realize how bad the movies have actually gotten, because now that I've gone back and rewatched all the Pierce Brosnan movies, there is really only one good one, which also spawned maybe one of the better first-person shooter video games ever.
Some would argue the best, certainly for consoles. GoldenEye was a game that was played so many thousands of hours played by kids at church lock-ins, at sleepovers, just to kill a weekend. But I still, from time to time, will fire up that game when I have the chance to. And I get as much fun playing it as I did then, especially if you do slappers only.
So,
also, too, as we're talking about, I'm assuming you guys might want to do some. It's up to you if you want to do sort of chronological order of the Daniel Craig films. I'm down for whatever, but I'd like to point out too that I remember the internet furor that erupted when they announced that Daniel Craig would be the next James Bond. And I remember seeing what was the film with Eric Bana he had just been in. Before that, they were the Israeli hit squad that was killing Munich. And he was phenomenal in Munich. So I remember thinking, oh, he was great in Munich. He's going to be fantastic as James Bond. But there were so many haters online. And the whole reason they gave two reasons. One, they didn't like that James Bond was blonde. And two, they thought Daniel Craig was ugly, which is objectively false.
Actually,
he is blonde, but he's definitely not ugly.
The ugly thing being objectively false.
Right. In fact, it's funny because there was someone who studied the ancient Greek philosophy of what beauty is, and Daniel Craig is the bottom of the list for all of the Bonds, including like the Peter Sellers ripoff Bond.
Right. Here's also Casino Royale, by the way.
Right. Yep. Okay.
Here's the test, though. Here's the test of how you tell if a man is attractive or not. Put him in swim trunks and have him walk out of the ocean.
Tight swim trunks.
That's all you got to do.
Swim trunks.
If he can pull off that move, it doesn't matter if his nose has been cut off. If he can pull off that move, he's an attractive man. Okay,
so Tucker, you make a good point. Let's do it like this. Let's talk about right before they cast Daniel Craig as James Bond. This was something that was hotly contested because after Die Another Day, Albert R. Broccoli, his production company said, you know what, we're on the hunt for a new Bond. And there was a lot of discussion. Here's some of the people who are considered for Bond. Clive Owen was close to getting cast as James Bond, but he wanted gross profit points on the series, and they weren't willing to give that to him.
The amazing thing, too, about that is that because of his flirtation with becoming James Bond, it gives us the only good scene from the Steve Martin Pink Panther movie.
Agreed.
Where he comes in as basically a James Bond type character. The whole reason to watch that movie is to see that cameo.
Sam Worthington is also up for the role in 2005. You might know him from Avatar, which I saw only once with Tucker and said, man, I liked Fern Gully more. And apparently everyone is just beside themselves because the sequels are now going to take an extra year to come out. Who really needs to see 5 more Avatar movies? Not me. Soapbox off of. And then Martin Campbell, who signs on to direct Casino Royale and had previously directed GoldenEye. So maybe the best Bond movie, at least in 20 years from when GoldenEye was made. They get him back, and he fought tooth and nail to get Henry Cavill cast as James Bond. And boy, oh boy, poor Henry Cavill, because nothing seems to be working out for that guy. He gets cast as Batman, and they're all like, meh. Then they put him in Mission Impossible Fallout, and they're like, meh. And then they put him in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., the remake of the television series, into a movie, which is flippin' awesome. And 2 people went to go see that in the theater.
Do you mean he was cast as Superman?
Did I say Superman? I said Superman.
You
right?
said Batman.
Oh,
you said Batman.
I'm sorry, Superman in one of the worst Batman movies.
Everyone needs to forgive us. It's early in the morning. We're still waking up.
So, but now he has success in The Witcher. That being said, there also at the same time was a group of people who were considered but turned down the role. One of those people being Christian Bale. And so this is 2005, and he considered the franchise very British, as well as having the opinion that the character represented like a serial killer, and he had already played one in American Psycho.
Wasn't one of the guys who was considered also like the Ukrainian doctor from ER?
Yes.
Oh yeah, what was
his name?
I'm googling it. I'm on it.
Yeah, Goran. Oh shoot, what was his name? Goran. Anyway, so
Goran Visnjic.
That's the one.
Goran Visnjic.
Here's the deal: of all the people that they were looking at, all of them were thin, like slender people with kind of, muscular build up by the pecs, and then a chiseled jaw and dark hair. So Daniel Craig getting cast is almost unheard of because he looks more like a brawler, and he doesn't look at what we expect James Bond to be, right? We all have the idea of what that James Bond silhouette is supposed to look like. And one of the things I think that they decided to emulate was really hot at this time was the Bourne Identity series, which they had said is the best non-James Bond franchise. So they took a page out of that book and they said, okay, it's time to rethink this franchise. And Casino Royale is different than other Bond movies because it is not a continuation of the story. It is a reboot completely of the story. Casino Royale opens with that amazing scene. Phil, do you remember seeing this in theaters and thinking like, whoa, something's wrong. It's in black and white.
Yeah. And it was like their tool to tell us that this is like a new origin, like that whole first scene, basically. Right. Isn't it in Prague?
Oh, yeah.
Is that the battle in the bathroom?
That's a flashback in that first scene, but it's him sitting in the station chief's office.
Yep.
And he's been selling secrets for profit. And the guy's like, you're not a 00, you haven't had a kill. And it flashes back immediately to his first kill, which is the guy who gave him the information to get there.
Which I think is important, too, in a James Bond movie, because they show that this James Bond is not a gadget and gun James Bond. They establish him as a hand-to-hand combat brawler.
He does some parkour.
Yeah, and we've seen James Bond throw a punch before, but nothing like what this guy's doing.
No, but can we circle back to that? Remember that for later on, because that is one of my actual one of my only critiques of Casino Royale. It has to do with gadgets and stuff.
We would definitely will. So we see Daniel Craig. Now, here's an important note for Daniel Craig. He actually has had a major influence on his version of Bond, starting with, I guess, when he went to go sign the contract for this, he had a last-minute waiver put in saying that he would not be dyeing his hair. Wow. So they had originally wanted him to dye his hair like a black or a very dark auburn color. And he said, nope, not going to happen. Because do you remember all the headlines of like Bond blonde?
Yeah.
Which
people lost their mind.
Did that make a lot of sense to either of you? Because I think Roger Moore in the first few had dyed his hair, but then he just didn't give a shit and pretty much went blonde for the later movies.
It didn't make any sense to me that people would get upset about the fact that Daniel Craig was blonde, because it always felt to me like, James Bond isn't a hair color. James Bond is something more than that. It requires a man who just has sort of like that. It's sort of like an essence of the dude. You just have to kind of look at the dude as a total. Like, I think Idris Elba would be an amazing James Bond.
I agree.
But a lot of people would go, well, no, he doesn't, fit this demographic mold that previous James Bonds have been in. And I just think, well, do you want the franchise to survive or not? Like, to just open it up so that you're not so fragile around, it has to be this skin color, this hair type, this body type. They have to speak this way.
I think they just have to ooze testosterone. Like when they breathe, you see little testosterone particles being exhaled,
Women want them, men want to be them. That has to be, if they can match that, then they're good to go. And it's not just that makes a James Bond movie, right? I mean, you've got the Bond girls, you've got the villains, you've got people with crazy names. Austin Powers, I think, shines a light best on it with some of like the names of the characters they come up with, and they're meant to be jokes, but those names could belong in an actual James Bond movie.
Oh yeah, I think when they made the Austin Powers franchise, it was a love letter to the James Bond movies, but also it kind of put this mirror up to them to be like, listen, we are not that far off how ridiculous you are in some of these.
If anything, Austin Powers is more of a true British person than James Bond ever was.
So when Daniel Craig gets involved in making this, he chooses to portray James Bond. He gets cast in 2005. They immediately start shooting for 2006's Casino Royale. And one of the things he does is he wants to have a direct hand in helping choose the Bond girls, the leading Bond girls. He wants to know that he's going to have a connection with them, and they're not just, they can't just fill out a cocktail dress. He wants someone that he can act across from in a very specific way. Because he sees that his James Bond character is, having this big emotional and character change in Casino Royale, because he goes from being just a cold-blooded killer in that first scene to having to be suave, and he doesn't belong. The whole point of Casino Royale as a movie is he doesn't belong at that poker table. He's not the elite James Bond that we have seen yet. He makes decisions based on his bravado, and he has a great character arc in this movie. Also, I want to note that at one point they said, well, we're reestablishing the Bond franchise. It was brought to their attention that one of the costume designers was planning on outfitting him in a white tuxedo instead of a black tuxedo. And I guess there was like they sent a messenger on like a bike from one end of the studio to the other, and they said, fuck no. James Bond has got to wear a black tuxedo. We can't go that far, or people are going to freak out even more than they already have.
Tell that to the movie poster for Spectre, though.
Right. Yeah. So, and it's funny because it does come back. Okay, so let's talk about Casino Royale specifically as a movie. This movie is amazing, and it's got great action, but to me, the non-action moments, like around the casino table, the scene where they're in the train on their way to the hotel, God, there's some really great tense moments in this movie that just amp up everything that happens.
When in the scene you're talking about in the train, when it's like Vesper and James are kind of sizing each other up, is awesome. That's where he's like basically tries to read her and tells her who she is, and then she comes right back at him. I love that scene. That's the last thing I watched right before we went on, actually. And it's probably missing.
Because they introduce her character and you instantly know, okay, so this is going to be the Bond girl in this movie, right? Like, she is the one who's going to come out. And Ava Green was an interesting choice, I think, for a Bond girl, because at that time she was well known in the indie circuit, but she was not an international star. To go, from Halle Berry in the previous movie to Ava Green was an interesting choice.
I'm sure some of that too, though, is budget considerations, right? Because like, if you're going to have a major Hollywood actress, that's just that can demand a high paycheck. That's going to be like way more expensive too than getting someone from the artsy indie scene.
I'm not 100% sure it had to do with money, though, because if the James Bond franchise has one thing, it is a shitload of money. But
that's true.
I think it might have been more about, like, you have this new Bond who isn't established, who people are already kind of questioning if he should be there. He's got blonde hair. They want to make him wear a white tuxedo. So you got to put somebody in there who can act, who's a good actress, number one. And then also who can, who actually like isn't going to upstage him in any way. So if you put a big star against Daniel Craig, especially in the first movie, it's just going to overshadow him as Bond and maybe ruin the whole thing. I think you've highlighted some really important stuff there too, because also with the Führer going on, I'm sure a lot of
big stars who are still risk averse would be like, I don't know if this is going to work out. Like, I don't know if this is something that I want to tie myself to. It could be something that just totally goes belly up. So it might be even less likely for a big name to sign on, even though it is James Bond. They can print money, just like, you can print money with Marvel superheroes or Star Wars now. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I don't know about you guys' feelings going into like Casino Royale, but I mean, I think we were all a little bit nervous about what it was going to be, because nobody really knew. Like, we knew Daniel Craig. We knew there was a bunch of like hubbub around him getting it, blonde hair, again, all that stuff. But then, so it was kind of a risk in general because everybody was kind of on the fence about it,
Right. Big risk, big reward.
Big reward.
To me, the one thing that they chose in this movie that was a direct callback, that was 100% fan service to say, don't worry, we'll take care of this, was casting Mads Mikkelsen as the villain and doing that Le Chiffre and doing that scar thing with his eye. This is the quintessential Bond villain, right? Cold as ice, dead stare, doesn't care to, if he kills a plane full of people as long as it helps him. And they put him in a very interesting position because the villain here is a guy who isn't he's not the one bent on world domination. He is the guy who handles the finances for the people who are bent on world domination. And I love that. I love that fact.
And that's what makes it so interesting, is because the whole reason they don't kill him, and James even plays in the game, is because he's lost $100 and whatever million of these really bad guys' money. And now he has to go win it back. So he decides to stage a poker game to win back $111 million or whatever it is. And otherwise they would have the movie would have been over. Go pop, pop, and Le Chiffre is gone.
Right.
That it was an interesting thing with the. I'm sorry. I was reading an article at the same time as I was listening to you, Phil. Did you just mention the poker game?
The poker game, yes.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So in the original book, it's actually a variation of Baccarat that they were playing in the game. But obviously, Baccarat isn't really super popular in the U.S. When this came out, this was in the middle of the Texas Hold'em boom on television, and that's what everyone wanted to play. And the Texas Hold'em scene is the only scene where I have to roll my eyes during the movie because it is so patently ridiculous, the game that gets played. I used to work for a TV show called Poker Night in America, and I produced a series on that show called Poker Night at the Movies, where we would watch poker scenes from movies, and then we would have like an actor and a poker player review them. And we started with the Casino Royale scene, which as a movie scene is fun, right? Like there's tension that's building, and you've got someone on the rail who's like explaining what's happening, so the audience that doesn't understand what Texas Hold'em is can understand what's happening. But the way the game plays out is so unbelievably ridiculous, because when it comes down to the showdown at the end, it's Bond, Le Chiffre, and two other players who are obviously they're people of wealth, right? They're either like warlords or something, or like mobsters or something, and they're playing with poker plaques. That's not just chips. They actually have like the giant rectangular plaques out,
which I love, and they have to use that spatula to move them. Oh god.
Casinos only bring those out when you're playing games that are in the millions and millions of dollars. Go ahead, Phil.
I was going to say, so like my thing with it is, and you probably know more about this than I do, Tucker, being like with your experience, but I didn't like it. And I thought a big part of it is with the poker game, the card game on screen, like I don't know how to play Baccarat at all.
Right.
But I always liked the mystique that James Bond, it was his game of choice, right? With the spatula and moving everything around. And it seems like by them, number one, trying to explain Texas Hold'em to a world where everybody knew Texas Hold'em. I mean, if they were worried about my grandma not understanding Texas Hold'em, let's be 100% honest, she's not going to that movie anyways. Any James Bond head probably was watching the World Series of Poker at that time, and wearing sunglasses on Saturday night with his buddies in the basement playing cards for $5.
Well,
so that was,
and it says,
oh, go ahead.
They've got those scenes at the bar where Ava Green is watching, and then that French actor goes over. He goes, "Yes, the river has a 6 and a 7 on it, and he needs at least one jack to take it to the." And so you're right, Phil. It was very. Let's explain this for anyone who doesn't understand poker. They might as well have been playing Go Fish.
Yeah,
and also like our poker, Tucker. You again, it's your world, but I don't know if Texas Hold'em is as classy of a game as they tried to make it out to be at all.
No,
it like kind of failed. It's one of my notes of like failures in that movie.
Yeah, so I mean, there are nosebleed games that happen that are very fancy, but people are not in their evening gown attire. They're not in black tie and stuff like that. People who are playing, they're the ones where those are the billionaires that show up, and they'll be dressed however the fuck they want. And the casino is going to wait on them hand and foot, and they're going to be in a room that has no observers because they want there to be no opportunity for anyone to be cheating. JJ, you mentioning the guy on the rail who's basically explaining to Ava Green what's going on. That's a very common trope in movies that have poker scenes because they're trying to build tension in something that is essentially a game of luck, a little bit of skill, but it's mostly about, are you making the right risk choices? But you know, the scenes where the hero wins a poker game, they're winning them mostly because of luck. And the movie will try to build tension in a way that even if you've played 5 hands of Texas Hold'em, you're like, oh, that's bullshit. That would not play out like that. And just to highlight this, the unlikelihood of the final hand where James Bond wins, they even have like the players show their hands in order of how strong they are, which is not what would happen. But I could go on that forever. But basically, the first player who shows his hand, he has a flush. He's got all spades, right? So, which is hard to get. So he's like, all right, I'm definitely ahead. And in most hands, he would be. The player after him shows a full house, 8's full of aces, which is obviously beats a flush. The player after him is Le Chiffre, who just happens to have a stronger full house. So he's got aces full of 6s. And then James Bond has a straight flush, which is one of the hardest things you can get. Now, a royal flush is a straight flush, but luckily they don't give him a royal flush. They give him 8-4 all spades. And it's just the kind of hand where you're like, are you kidding me right now?
As somebody who's watched a lot of poker, Tucker, what is the likelihood that all those hands are dealt in a single hand of poker?
I mean, it's a non-zero percentage chance, but it's not a 1% chance. It's somewhere between 0% and 1%. So it's just, it's well shot. It's a beautiful scene for movies go, but as far as poker, it's like absolutely ridiculous. And clearly, like they were leaping on the current zeitgeist at that time of Texas Hold'em being popular.
Okay, and going back to what you say, like the kind of the BS tension building. I mean, I've played a lot of poker, and when everybody has their chips on the table and the river is dropped, right? Like, you flip your cards. You're not like, ooh, this is what I got. Hold on, wait a minute.
Yep, because it's called a slow roll.
Yeah,
it's called a slow, and it's frowned upon if you are too slow to throw up your winning hand because you're trying to make the other person think that they won, which is what I believe James Bond does to Le Chiffre. Le Chiffre thinks he's won with his aces full of 6s, and then Bond slow rolls him with a straight flush. Like in any poker room, Le Chiffre would have stood up and punched you in the fucking nose for doing that, and the casino would not have thought you were wrong to do it. They would have been like, yeah, slow rolling was a dick move, dude.
Oh boy.
Okay, one other thing I want to touch on real quick too, because we got some other films to get through, and we're concentrated on this one a lot of time. So real quick, maybe the second best casting in this James Bond reboot is the recasting of James Bond's best CIA friend, Felix, now played by Jeffrey Wright, who I really enjoy a lot in this. I mean, Phil, I mean, what do you think of Jeffrey Wright in this role?
Number one, Felix Leiter is a James Bond staple. And as much as I like the other side characters, I think some were played by the goofy guy who kind of looks like Fred Thompson, like in the Pierce Brosnan movies, you know, like these sidekick guys, but he was like kind of a goofball.
Yeah,
Felix Jimbo. Right. Yep. So like bringing Felix Leiter back. And I remember seeing this movie, and when we realized it was Felix Leiter, I think me and you saw it together. I kind of grabbed your arm a little bit and it was like, oh my God, this is so cool. And it was like just the first of many throwbacks in the Daniel Craig thing. But I thought he was excellent. And he plays it so understated too, which is awesome. Like he's just kind of in the room and he kind of does that Jeffrey Wright, like, I'm going to talk under my breath a little bit and whatever. And he's more of an aide to James Bond than he is as like his own character. You know,
I don't know if you've ever noticed his acting style, but what he does is only move his bottom lip. Like when he talks, it's like he keeps his top lip completely still, and all the talking is done through his bottom lip, making it that really quick conversation where you go by and you hear it like this, and then you go on and he's different. Like watch out for Le Chiffre.
Really interesting thing about him too is he's the new Commissioner Gordon in the new Batman movie that's coming out. So we'll get to see him bring his bottom lip acting into the Batman universe pretty soon.
Jeffrey Wright, I think also it's important too, because when they were recasting James Bond, one of the big discussions was like, maybe it's time for us to have a black Bond. And I don't think the studio was willing to take that chance, which in all honesty, you know, someone, Tucker, I think you mentioned Idris Elba earlier. Idris Elba would have been an amazing James Bond. We saw what he did in Luther, and you could have put that up on the big screen immediately. But choosing Jeffrey Wright, I think it's a good indication that this Bond is a more 21st century worldly Bond. And that you're picking the best actor for the part. You're not picking them based on what you think someone in the state of Arkansas wants to be in a Bond movie.
I think Phil put it best. It's just that, you know, James Bond is not a specific demographic. He's merely a man who smolders. Yeah, that's all you need. A smoldering man.
At the end of, I'm sorry, Phil, you got another thing you want to talk about Jeffrey Wright?
No, I just wanted to say, like, I want to add in another, like, really important casting choice in the movie. I think that the best thing they did, actually, that made everybody be kind of like, it's going to be okay, was recasting Judi Dench as M. And, like, not really, like, even having her miss a beat. Like, yeah, it's a new Bond, but she's the same M she's been for the entire like Pierce Brosnan series as well, you know?
Yeah, you almost do wonder if this is that's the only thing that's a continuation from the previous Bond series, right? Like,
well, did they? You guys have to correct me because I'm not quite sure about this, but did they ever establish that James Bond is really a code name and not a name?
No.
Like there have been multiple James Bonds, or is that just me being dumb?
And I think, like, when we jump ahead later, but, like, you know, in Skyfall, that's pretty much put to bed too, that whole idea. Okay. So, but I just think that it was a really good choice that she worked so well in that role, you know, that why change it? Like, I mean, we all knew her as M more than anything, I think, you know, despite all the other things she had done. Maybe now people know that she was in Cats, but at that point,
it's almost like them bringing J.K. Simmons back in Spider-Man to be J. Jonah Jameson again. Yeah. Like it's a totally different continuity, but when we saw him, we were like, no one can do it better than him. Just give us him again, please.
Yeah, and it was kind of like, okay, like everybody's uncomfortable, but here's Judi Dench as M, and now you can all rest easy, you know?
Yeah, everyone, chill out. It's going to be all right. There are two major characters missing from this movie that we have come to know in the James Bond series that I think people were surprised they didn't get in this movie. And that would be Q and Moneypenny.
Okay, so that is one of my gripes, the Q thing. And only because they spent years, was it like 2 or 3 movies with Desmond Llewellyn grooming John Cleese to be the new Q.
Yep.
And I think we got 1, maybe 2 movies where he actually was Q, and then they just dropped him. And I mean, I know that he doesn't really fit in this James Bond universe, but I love John Cleese so much, and he did fit like the Q mentality for me, I guess, that I was just really depressed and upset that he wasn't in it.
Yeah, I think he approached playing Q like a middle school principal approaches a symposium where the entire school is sitting on the bleachers, which is, all right now, Just get through this for an hour, Bond. Come on. But I agree. And do you remember, like, they referred to him as R when both Llewellyn and Cleese were in the same movie? Like, Llewellyn was still Q, was Q, and then Cleese was R.
And Llewellyn was always kind of like scolding him for not being a smart enough evil scientist, or not evil scientist, but just gadget man.
Yep.
He'd like shake his head and do that Desmond Llewellyn thing. But I did miss the character. I don't know if I missed the character of Q in the movie so much, but I definitely missed John Cleese as Q, or just having that, like, the gadgety thing. But you brought it up earlier. They kind of had gone away from the whole gadget type mentality, especially for this film.
Well, and I mean, really, the only gadget that comes to my mind that he uses is the defibrillator that he keeps in the glove compartment of his car next to his maps and his rental agreement. So
and we don't know. I mean, I've never rented a car in Europe, but maybe those just come standard.
That's a good point, Phil. Okay, so he defeats Le Chiffre in this poker game, but now they don't want Le Chiffre dead. I mean, he could have done that a long time ago. They want to take him for information. They are telling Bond, you need to bring us Le Chiffre alive. And then, to me, the biggest twist of this entire movie takes place when you find out that Ava Green is not in this as your typical Bond girl. She's in this because the love of her life has been kidnapped, and so she's playing double agent to get him back. So there was never going to be a future where these two end up together. Never. And that blew my mind. Also, the scene in Venice with the building sinking is, I think, one of the most interesting Bond bottleneck last locations of any of the movies, just with that thing sinking and those giant floats exploding. I thought the end of Casino Royale was awesome, and then you get the chase, and just every part of that movie gets you excited for what the next Bond is going to be.
Well, and what I liked about it is like all that, but also like it just going back to what you said. If you remember, like in the movie, there is a long period now of time that has taken place between the scene where Le Chiffre is torturing Bond and like whipping him with that rope ball in the nether,
in the nuts,
and
in the plums.
And from that, when all the shit goes down and they get taken out, and then to the point where he realizes that she's taken this money and is giving it to whoever, and then you go to that thing. But the pacing of this movie is different because all other Bond movies up to this point were like, slow, a little bit of spy stuff. He's going to like maybe figure some stuff out, to big action crescendo. And this kind of was, but it had these like ups and downs kind of flowing through the movie, which I really liked as well.
This movie also does something that no other Bond movie has, which it sets itself up for a direct sequel.
Does it pick up? The Quantum of Solace is the only Daniel Craig movie that I have not of the Bond movies that I have not watched, and I think it was because I got tainted by bad reviews that I heard of it. I can't say that it's a bad movie or not. I haven't seen it, but my understanding is that it essentially picks up right where Casino Royale leaves off. Right.
So yes. You find out that Casino Royale is essentially setting you up for a bigger Bond world where it's not just one case and done. There's a bigger case that he is going to continue to work on, that I imagine real spy stuff is very similar to, where you don't just all of a sudden get Le Chiffre and you're done. What they're doing in this is they're setting up like, okay, so you went to get Le Chiffre is tied to this organization and we want to go after this organization. So putting this movie to bed, Casino Royale is the highest rated, according to critics, of the Daniel Craig Bonds. It sits at 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. And then Quantum of Solace gets released, in 2008. So Casino Royale, 2006, Quantum of Solace, 2008. So the second they finished Casino Royale, they virtually got into production on Quantum of Solace. Interestingly enough, they only signed Daniel Craig for one Bond movie at the get-go because they didn't know if it was going to work. And after Casino Royale became a success, he signed on to do 4 more Bond movies and insured his body for $9.5 million.
Do you remember too, and I don't mean to take us back to previously, but I also remember when they were making Casino Royale, there was some sort of like a story about him not knowing how to drive like a stick shift or something, or him not driving a boat correctly, that people thought meant he was unqualified to be Bond. And I just thought, don't you guys know what acting is? He also doesn't know how to actually murder people, under cover of night. So I'm not sure why this is an issue. It's like people were trying to call into question his masculinity, like as though he wasn't man enough to pretend to be James Bond.
Well, so the thing about Daniel Craig as a human being is that he was not destined to play an action star when you looked at his early career. This guy was a guy who did serious dramatic work, loved stage work. He is a huge nerd at heart. Do you know who his favorite band is? Radiohead.
No. Well, that's like a lot of people's favorite band.
I guarantee you this is the first James Bond who was walking to set listening to Radiohead. I can guarantee it. He's also, he's a major fan of Star Trek, the original series, Doctor Who, Firefly. He makes an uncredited cameo in a Star Wars movie as a stormtrooper just for fun. This guy is kind of a nerd at heart. He also does not like guns in real life. And so that I think I read in an Entertainment Weekly article was one of the hardest parts of playing Bond for him, was learning all of the gun work. And he never really felt comfortable holding a gun during it, because he doesn't, right? Like, and he's not holding the gun that previous James Bonds, that PP7 with the long silencer barrel on it.
It's a PPK.
PPK, thank you.
Walther PPK.
So, to me, you're correct. This guy was a long shot. He was, were they bluffing, to use a poker term, for this movie? Were they really holding two offsuit numbered cards in their hand, and they bluffed their way into a big pot?
I think what they did was they went all in on a straight draw, and they hit that straight on the river. That's what they did.
I mean,
and they won big.
You know how, people are always like, man, if I would have known what Netflix was going to be, before they started streaming, I wish I would have invested when they're just sending out DVDs. Like,
right.
We probably
big risk, big reward.
We probably should have watched Layer Cake and been like, we need to put some stock behind Mr. Daniel Craig, because it's only going up from here.
Yeah, there's some truth there. Okay, so Quantum of Solace comes out. I got to tell you, Quantum of Solace is my least favorite of all the Craig Bonds. I was ready for a new adventure. And even though this technically is a new adventure, it feels to me like it is, it's just a longer version of watching Casino Royale without my favorite parts of it.
I think that it's okay. If it was any other movie, if it was any other James Bond movie, we would have thought it was awesome. But it's kind of like the come down, like you just ate your favorite steak in the world, and now you're going to go to this place that's rated really well, but it's not quite as good as the place you just ate your favorite steak. So I don't think it's actually, I went back and rewatched it because me and my wife, she'd never seen any James Bond movies. And I was saying, well, this new movie's coming out, we should start watching them. She initially thought that we should start watching from the get-go. So I watched Dr. No One from Russia with Love right away. And I was like, this is going to take forever. But then we went and we watched and I was like, so here's how it works. Explain the Daniel Craig thing's a brand new start. So you don't need to know anything about this. In fact, you might be better off not having any reference for what's going on here, And when we watched it the second time, I did not dislike it nearly as much as when I left the movie theater, which would have been the only time I had seen it since the movie theater. Probably because I disliked it so much in the movie theater. And
here's the thing. When you get off of the high of Casino Royale, it was going to be hard to capture that same lightning in a bottle again, without a doubt. And even that, with that, they don't give you more of those things you want. Like, you don't get your Q or money penny in this movie. You had these great things that you could have added, and they chose not to. I will say this for Quantum of Solace. Number one, this is the shortest Bond movie in the franchise. So at an hour,
what a compliment.
well, I mean, at an hour,
to its credit, it's short.
but here's the thing: at an hour and 40 minutes, they didn't have the time to ramp up some of the action sequences that the other ones did. They didn't. This movie certainly didn't take the time to ratchet up the tension like Casino Royale did. It felt like it was moving pretty fast. It also is. There was a study done in New Zealand. This is the most violent of all the Bond films. In fact, this one I think was pretty close to getting an R rating because of the 106 minutes, a majority of them are spent in some pretty like gruesome, bloody, violent action.
Don't they drown like one of the Bond, like the first Bond girl? You know how there's always the two Bond girls, right?
Yep.
Like the first girl,
the one that dies.
But don't they drown her in like crude oil or something?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is. It's hard to watch.
It does introduce a new character no, it doesn't, because isn't Mathis in Casino Royale as well? Giancarlo. You know who I'm talking about, the Italian guy.
Yeah. I think they make mention of him. I don't know if he has a. No, he is. Yeah, because he's the French cop. He's the oh, she needs this and this, and I think he's technically Italian. I'm sorry, I keep calling him French, but he's Italian.
So I like the things I liked about this movie when I rewatched it. I thought the sets were amazing. I thought the places they took you to, like the South America stuff, was awesome as well. I think it has a good villain. I think it has a good Bond girl. I think just overall, it's too short. They don't build enough of a story, and you're coming off that high of seeing Casino Royale. You know, it just was never. I mean, it was kind of set up for failure, even though it wasn't that bad. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that makes sense. There's probably some sort of psychological term for this too, like recency bias or something like that, where it's you're already comparing it to something else, and it doesn't have the benefit of being compared to nothing, the way that Casino Royale was a fresh start. So you're bound to go, oh, you know, it doesn't compare to the same sort of feelings that I got watching Casino Royale. I'm going to have to cue this up today and give it a watch.
So in all reality, it is dealing with a singular version of what every Bond movie after Dr. No up until Casino Royale had to deal with, which was like, is this as good as this one? You know, but it was a one-off though, because there was only one movie to reference it by.
This also, I will give Quantum of Solace two things that I really enjoyed in it that kind of take it away from other things. Number one, there's a great rooftop running scene. I don't know why I love a rooftop run scene, but I do, and Quantum of Solace is a good one. Secondly, I like the fact that in the plot of this movie, the CIA is turning a blind eye, and it makes America look like it doesn't care about this, like, Bolivian coup that's taking place. And so that's why MI6 has to step up and really do some serious spy stuff.
Isn't the other CIA guy? So Felix is always on James's side throughout the series from this point forward. But isn't the other CIA guy the guy who's like trying to like wheel and deal with the bad guys? We're like, we don't care. They're taking over. They're getting rid of our problem. Isn't that the guy from Stranger Things, like the sheriff?
Yeah, it's David Harbour.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
Yep, and he plays such a scuzz in this.
He is a really scuzzy guy. You know, he even like calls out Jeffrey Wright for pretending he didn't know James Bond.
Yeah.
Also, this is so now we went through no real hokiness in the first thing except for the poker scene, apparently, according to Tucker and I think everybody. But they did the first girl who gets drowned in oil. Her name was Strawberry Fields, so they went back to kind of that corny Bond girl name stuff.
Oh God!
I mean, I think we should just move on from Quantum of Solace.
Yeah,
it's kind of depressed me.
I definitely want to, because Quantum of Solace does not get the critical acclaim that Casino Royale does. It does well at the box office. It actually does better than Casino Royale did, but there was this kind of hush afterwards because no one, just like after Die Another Day, no one was demanding to see another Bond movie because everyone left this thing going like, meh, okay, meh, no big deal. And so we get a long period in between Bonds. It's 4 years between 2008's Quantum of Solace and 2012's Skyfall. And what they did but in those 4 years was rewrite a script and turn it into my so close to number one, but second favorite Bond film of all time, and a Bond movie that I could watch over and over and over again. I will also say it is the best opening Bond song of all the Daniel Craig Bonds. I think that Adele's Skyfall is amazing.
I disagree with you completely on that one, but that's for another day.
So, okay. Which of the Daniel Craig Bonds, which is the one do you think is the best?
I like the Jack White song.
You gotta be full of shit. Are you kidding me?
I don't even like Soundgarden or Chris Cornell, rest in peace. But I like the Chris Cornell song better than the Adele song. But also, and this might make a lot of people hate me, I dislike Adele like with every fiber in my being. I don't get why she's famous. I get she has a good voice, but I don't understand anything about the fame. And that song, everybody's like, oh, it's amazing. And I will say this, that the song that was supposed to be the theme song for Spectre, which was by Radiohead, who is Daniel Craig's favorite band, apparently,
yep,
is better than anything else. And it didn't even make the cut because they went with a Sam Smith song. But by the way,
Sam Smith gloated that it only took him 15 minutes to write it, and boy, oh boy, does it show.
And I think that might be better than the Skyfall theme song.
What? Phil,
Wow.
I am shocked. Okay, so I thought we sat on the same side of a lot, but apparently we don't.
Everything else about this movie, I know we sit on the same side of.
Okay. So Skyfall opens with do you remember how this movie? Do you remember the opening like 2 minutes of this movie?
Okay, hold on here. No, is this the one where the city is crumbling behind him?
Like in the opening, like musical sequence, it's got the stag head, and it's like kind of like a kaleidoscope feeling for it.
Which is the Bond credits, like the song credits.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like the movie itself opens with a shot of an empty hallway. And then like there's this music cue of like ba-da-bump, and Bond like comes like strafes around a corner with this gun, and I was hooked immediately. It was a phenomenal opening shot in this Bond movie, and Bond is teamed up with a woman. We don't really know who she is. Her name is Eve, and they are trying to get a hard drive. And so the opening of this Bond is a chase sequence involving a motorcycle on top of buildings, and then a train, and then driving a construction scoop on a train and scooping chunks of the train while it's moving. And then the death of James Bond.
Yeah, because Eve has to take the shot, and she misses and hits James Bond instead of the bad guy.
Yep.
Because it opens. Okay, so it's all coming. I haven't seen it for a little bit, but it's all coming back to me right now. So it opens with he's trying to save that guy's life, and the hard drive's already gone, and he's trying to get people to come, and then he hops in the Range Rover with Eve.
Yep.
And they take off after this guy on a motorcycle, and it turns into everything you just said. And he like gets shot on top of a train and falls into the water, basically.
Yep. And then the opening credits take place.
A large part of the reason why, though, I think that Skyfall just stands so far and ahead of a lot of the Bonds is that was the first of the two Bond movies that was directed by Sam Mendes, who directed American Beauty, which I believe you referenced earlier in the podcast.
Sure did.
They bring in like one of the top tier directors in Hollywood and in theater, Sam Mendes, just an unbelievable director. And they got someone who is known for, artistic pieces and other things like that to come in and put their name on a giant franchise. And it shows even in the trailer for Skyfall that you go, this is going to be a different Bond movie.
So 2 things. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that Sam Mendes was like, Daniel Craig was like in the interim while they were like trying to figure things out. Daniel Craig wanted Sam Mendes because they had got along so well on Road to Perdition.
Yep.
I believe so. Yes. Yep.
And so like, just for him, he's like, bring this guy in, let him direct the movie. And I think at that point, Daniel Craig had the clout to do that. Right. So he comes in, and you could definitely tell for the first time in a long time, like, this isn't just a James Bond movie made by a good action director. This is a James Bond movie made by like a legit, this guy can win awards director, which is, I think like shapes the whole movie almost.
He also has a deep bench of other collaborators who freshened up aspects of the James Bond franchise. For example, he brought in Thomas Newman, who I love. Thomas Newman is one of the best composers, I think, working in Hollywood. And he had worked with Sam Mendes on a bunch of different projects. And so bringing him in gave a different sound to this Bond movie. And I think you see that most of all when he goes to the casino, the like Japanese casino, or like the Macau casino, where the music, the music is as much of a character in that scene as anyone who's sitting at a bar or wrestling with Komodo dragons.
Okay. So JJ, we saw this movie after you were drinking a lot of vodka Red Bulls, and I was drinking everything on the planet after a Dave Matthews concert in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Yep, we sure did.
And had you seen it before? Okay. So I remember there were so many times during this movie where I was just like, I just grab your arm or almost like just stand up and applaud because I was so happy with what I was seeing on screen. But one of them was they introduce a new Q finally.
Yep. Ben Whishaw.
Which, but
it's like a Q is a millennial, basically.
But you get the character back, and on top of it, we legitimately get maybe the best Bond villain of all time.
Agreed. What Javier Bardem does as Silva is just amazing, because first of all, I love any Bond movie where someone from MI6 has turned. Right? Like those are great. Those are great Bond villains because there's so much more tension involved in it. I think of like Sean Bean in GoldenEye.
006.
Yep. This is also a great role for him because he takes his time and chews up the scenery. The first introduction of his character where he's coming down that rickety old elevator, and it's that long scene in the empty, like bombed out building on that abandoned island. And you see all the computer equipment, but he just takes his time to slowly walk up to Bond. And the feeling inside the theater when it became clear that he was homosexual and you had to wonder if Bond was going to honeypot himself in this was palpable, because it showed that, like, yep, this is a Bond for a new generation. This is a Bond that is not going to be stuck in old tropes. It was fresh, it was new, and my God, did they ratchet up the tension on this so good.
So they have, everything about him. That first scene with him, and that's in China, right? That's in the island off of Macau.
Yeah.
Okay. So you go from that, and then they have him in captivity in England. And I just remember, like, very vividly when he describes what because he's basically he was M's James Bond before James Bond was M's James Bond, right?
Yep.
On a former station. And she had like used him, and he felt like just betrayed, and he had like attributed all the bad things that had happened to him because of, what M had done. And then he tells everybody, what he had gone through. And then he pulls the dental implant out of his mouth, and his face just sinks in, and you're like, holy shit.
It is one of the best, like, mixtures of a physical effect and a CG effect, I think, that we see in any Bond movie. And because he's telling the story of how he had been captured, and M chose not to have him, like, she chose not to save him, and so he took his cyanide pill.
Oh, yeah. Have you ever seen what cyanide does to you if it doesn't kill you, and then he pulls it out? Oh. God, it just gives me I just get like jitter, like, Ugh.
And
God.
let's also say this. Judi Dench has been amazing as M. In this movie, they give her more to do and they allow her to act more than any other movie. From James Bond coming back from the dead and appearing in her apartment and her being pissed off, that he's in his apartment, to at the same time talking about how like she spoke at his funeral, to this interrogation scene where they keep cutting back to her as she's watching this, because he treats her like a mother who abandoned a child.
Mhm.
And you see like a lot of similarities between her relationship with Bond and her relationship with Silva, and how she's anything to get the job done. Also, that the minute that they capture him and you're like, wait a minute, we're only 45 minutes into this movie, this is going to go bad.
And yeah, shit's going down. And like, so then it cuts to, okay, so like one of my favorite things that movies can do when you reboot them or do something different is you can like kind of like make recompense with mistakes you've made in the past or whatever. So going back to like what James Bond was up until Pierce Brosnan. Okay. And the bad things that the Pierce Brosnan Bond brought in was like this age of technology, this new MI6 headquarters, all this stuff. Right. So it's kind of to me like, like in if you go like to the X-Men franchise where like, who was the director of the X-Men franchise, the original movies again?
Bryan Singer.
When Bryan Singer did he do Days of Future Past? Was that the first one he did back?
No.
Yeah, that's the one he did.
Days of Future Past?
Yep, that was his return to the franchise.
And he basically gets to go and rewrite everything and pretend that X-Men 3 or X3 didn't happen because it's about going back and forth to the future. So they kind of get the chance to like take a wrecking ball to all this stuff that hasn't been working in the James Bond franchise. So one of the things Javier Bardem's character does is like his big thing is he blows up MI6, the big technical white building, right? And that's like, again, what was that, like maybe 55 minutes into the movie, JJ?
Yeah. And then it forces them into their what used to be the MI6.
Hold on though. Was that right then?
Yeah. So the stolen hard drive, and she's taken to task by a new character that we're meeting, Gareth Malloy, who's played by Ray Fiennes, who, by the way, was thought to have been a Bond potential when Pierce Brosnan was cast. He's part of like an oversight committee, and he is just raking her across the coals. And that's one of the reasons that Bond comes back is she's in this thing. She's being raked across the coals. She gets back. She gets this weird cryptic message when she's on the way from the hearing back to MI6. And she sees the building explode from her car, from her town car.
Right.
And so that they can't just shut down MI6. And so Bond is there and they have to go back.
And they walk into the tunnels. And James Bond is like, oh, I've always heard about this place. I didn't know if it existed. And it was like literally the old MI6 from like every movie up until Pierce Brosnan.
Really? Okay. I was not aware of that at all. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And it was rumored that it was like MI6 was born out of Winston Churchill, like in World War II. And so, it's underground. It was safe from the bombings of London. You also get the fact that they're like, okay, so anytime that they have to, make good in where they're at. So all of a sudden Bond is using an old car. Why is he using an old style car? Well, because the new cars are all blew up in MI6. So you get this classic vehicle instead. You also get to meet the new Q, Ben Whishaw, who gives him gadgets that are fun 21st century gadgets. Things like a handgun that is coded to his fingerprints, so only he can shoot this particular handgun. And
so in other words, he's not giving him backpack gyrocopters.
right. There's no spacesuit. This also is they're the underdog in this because it's clear that Silva has planned this whole thing already, and Silva doesn't care about James Bond. in a weird way, James Bond is a secondary character to what Silva wants. Silva is only using James Bond to get to M.
It's almost like a torture M piece. Like
Yep.
this whole thing. It's like his masterpiece was to just like, how much misery can I put this woman through before I,
Right. Well, and on the topic of Silva, I keep thinking about this, and I mean, obviously, I don't know the actual answer to it, but I wonder if we get Javier Bardem as Silva in a universe where he didn't play Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men, because in that film is the film that shows that, oh my God, Javier Bardem is so menacing as a villain that you might not have considered beforehand. And just like Sam Mendes kind of gets to the James Bond franchise through Road to Perdition and his relationship with Daniel Craig, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get Javier Bardem as Silva if he didn't do No Country for Old Men with the Coen brothers.
I guarantee you he wouldn't have made it.
I don't know if we even know who Javier Bardem is right now, if it wasn't for No Country for Old Men. But also, so you got to think about that too, how good this villain was, being played by a guy that is iconically known for being another bad guy.
And didn't he make like a joke about, why do I keep getting these roles with weird haircuts?
Yeah. Because they dyed his hair blonde in this. So he matches Bond's blonde Bond. So Skyfall is, low. What I like about it is it's very low tech when it comes down to any James Bond film, because after Silva escapes again and it's clear he's coming after Moneypenny, he's coming after M, excuse me. It's clear that they need to find some place to hide, but nowhere is safe because you don't know where Silva has planned. They need to get one step ahead of him. And so Bond uses a radio beacon, and then Gareth Malloy comes out, and it turns out that he's not such just a giant asshole, but he actually cares about what's going on. At this point, he's been shot during an assassination attempt on M at another one of these hearings. And so Bond and M escape, and they at one point have asked Bond about Skyfall in a psychological test, and then he's like, I'm done. He gets up and leaves.
Because you find out it's his childhood home at this point.
It's his childhood home. You get the most backstory on Bond that you get in any of the movies in this. You find out that his parents were killed and that M loves to attract orphans because they make the best killers. They arrive at Skyfall. Now, James Bond has been presumed dead now for months. So they sold it. Like there's no furniture left in this. The only thing that's left is, and it's at the very end of his tenure, is the caretaker for the Skyfall estate.
So, and they do something to you with this, because the actor they picked, I am almost positive, was not the actor who it was supposed to be, even though Albert Finney kills it. But when he walks out, I honest to God, almost had a heart attack because I thought it was Sean Connery. And I'm almost positive that's who it was supposed to be.
I think that we have heard a lot of rumors that it was written specifically for Sean Connery. I mean, it's a Scottish manor. It would have made total sense.
Kincaid is the character.
I think that, it would have been amazing to have Sean Connery in this role, but he's retired and he goes, I'm retired. I'm not waiting for the right role. I'm retired from acting. And God, wouldn't that have been amazing? Wouldn't Sean Connery playing that character have been amazing? And you're right, Phil. Albert Finney does a great job in this, but it was clearly written to be another homage to classic Bond.
Maybe Sean Connery's just holding out, though, for another Highlander. Maybe that's what it is he's just saying, no, if I'm coming back, it's for Highlander, and that's it.
Like how Joe Pesci waited for a Hoffa script and Martin Scorsese. Connery wants Highlander. Go ahead, JJ.
I was gonna say, so they get to his childhood home, and they explain things like they have a priest's hole that leads out to this old country church, tunnel underneath the ground, and how after Bond's parents were killed. He stayed in there for a whole week, and you just get a deeper glimpse into it. And they also do some of the best. Like, this is the James Bond meant for people who loved Home Alone, right? Because
Right.
he sets booby traps everywhere. This is the Home Alone Bond.
So when you say it's the least tech savvy Bond, they have essentially been like, their main office has been blown up. They've been kind of sent underground to Skyfall. And now there's like a 10-minute montage of them doing the Home Alone sequence where they're like boarding up the windows and throwing down like James Bond's old jacks on the ground for the guy to trip on. And like, and they're, what are they defending it with? 2 like double barrel shotguns, pretty much.
Yeah. They go to the armory essentially, and it turns out all the guns had been sold. And so they're down to like 2 double barrel shotguns, which he, saws off and turns them into like these amazing little pieces. And then like M's big role here is she runs the light switches, because they have taken a bunch of just random nails and put them inside a light bulb with a little bit of gunpowder, so that when an electric current goes through the light bulb, it causes the shotgun shell to explode, and then the nails go everywhere. I mean, this thing is all about mutually assured destruction, because Javier Bardem shows up in a giant helicopter. These guys are ready to do anything to let Skyfall go. And it's a great ending sequence there. It's full of action, and you get, to me, one of the scariest Bond scenes where he ends up on the frozen lake, because to me, that's terrified me since I was a kid, is going underneath the ice. You hear horror stories of people from our past being trapped under the ice. And so, and watching him do that run, that high knee run to keep from like cracking the ice was great. And the movie culminates in a scene inside this small church where M has been wounded, and it's a standoff because Javier Bardem doesn't care if he dies. That's what I think is interesting about this. He's not holding M hostage, as a bulletproof vest so that he can get away. He just wants to kill M. That's his goal, and he wants Bond to suffer as part of it.
So I think, okay, so then you get maybe one of the most emotional moments in the history of James Bond, when Javier Bardem basically succeeds and she's got the bullet wound and she's dying, but she's telling James how much he's meant to her, basically.
Yep.
And I don't know. I thought that was like, it almost like now, so we're watching on screen, we're watching somebody who we've known since when did GoldenEye come out?
95.
So in like from 1995 till whenever. So it's been a part of like basically our like pre-adolescent, adolescent, and into adulthood life as M is just like gone on the screen, you know? And it's, I don't know. It was a pretty, it was kind of a tender moment. And it was also like,
it's a fitting way to say goodbye to her character, don't you think?
Yeah. And I'm sure like after playing that role for so many years, she was sick of it, I guess. It's like, maybe not sick of it, but it was just her time.
Well, and I think it also, it's part of this reboot strategy. So, you might think Casino Royale is the reboot, but really they've done a lot of work to reboot this character just in general. And this is another part of that storyline, is having, what has been, a constant taken away. And you find out at the end of this movie too, that M is the person who's the head of MI6. And so you find out Ray Fiennes' character's taking it over, which I am over the moon about, because it was a great choice.
So first of all, he walks into the office, and I remember this very specifically because I got so excited. So he walks into the office, and it's the old, like the same office that Sean Connery walked into in From Russia with Love and all these things. It has the leather padded doors. And he walks into the office, and the girl who shot him is sitting there.
Naomi Harris, who plays, at this point, we've known her as Eve.
so it's Eve, and he's like, she goes, he goes, oh, sitting behind the desk now, and she's like, yeah, field work didn't really agree with me, and he puts his hat on he puts the hat he's wearing or the jacket he's wearing on the coat rack. Again, very iconic of like the previous James Bond movies. And he's like, I never caught your full name. She goes, Eve Moneypenny. And then we're just like, oh my God. And then the old James Bond music starts playing and he walks in, and now Ralph Fiennes is M. And it was just, I mean, I don't remember leaving a movie that satisfied with like everything. I mean, I probably, even to this day, I'm not sure, like in the last like 5 or 6 years, I've seen a movie that was that satisfying all the way around.
Yeah.
And it's like they knew exactly where to pull at your kind of James Bond heartstrings and the callbacks they needed to make, and how they kind of brought everything roundabout to like what James Bond, the core is, you know?
It's everything about this was fan service, but not in the way that you wanted it. It is the way you needed it. I was shocked at how good Skyfall was. I remember, so we saw Skyfall, and I think I saw it 4 more times in theaters because I loved every minute of this movie, with the small exception of the scene where they're in Macau. They're going into that casino that's got the Komodo dragons, and Eve Moneypenny shaves him. Is the one scene that I just, it's like, obviously it's all about trust because she shot him and he's letting her know that he trusts her, even though she made a mistake. But just, I don't know why, but any movie or any scene in any movie where someone shaves another person just is not my cup of tea.
Well, this is an incredibly long movie too. Am I correct?
This is, I think Skyfall, it might be the longest. I know that No Time to Die that's coming out is the actual longest of all the James Bond films. But this one, this one's 2 hours and 25 minutes long.
Yeah. And you could make an argument that there is the formula that is James Bond. So there's always like the first girl, and then there's the second, then there's the girl who really matters. Although in this movie, they have the first girl, the girl at the casino in Macau.
Yep.
But there is no real second Bond girl.
Yeah, really that's true, because I think you're assuming that Naomi Harris is going to be the second Bond girl, right?
Well, she ends up being the Bond girl of all Bond girls in Eve Moneypenny, but
I also think that you might even be able to say like M becomes the Bond girl in this. Very non-traditional.
She becomes like the apple of his eye, and like his sole mission is to protect her, which is kind of the role of the secondary of the main Bond girl. So you got kind of the floozy or whatever, and then you've got the main one. And I think M she becomes like so much of the storyline in general. Like she's more part of it than anything else. Than any other movie she's ever been in, or M has ever been, any M.
Yeah.
And so you're probably right. That probably is what's going on there. It's M is the Bond girl. A 80-year-old Judi Dench is the apple of James Bond's eye.
Yeah, I'm sure that there was a scene where she was supposed to come out of that frozen lake wearing a bikini with a knife on the side, and she was like, nope, cut.
Ooh.
So Skyfall ends, and people are itching. They cannot wait. And so into production immediately becomes Spectre. And I remember when Spectre was in production, and I almost peed my pants when they announced who the main villain was going to be in Spectre, because we had all recently consumed Inglourious Bastards and had decided that Christoph Waltz was one of the greatest villains of all time, and finding out that Christoph Waltz was going to get his shot at Bond villainhood was amazing. Daniel Craig's back. They've got this girl Léa Seydoux, who is going to be the Bond girl, who is really hot at that time. She had been in Midnight in Paris at that point. gosh, I mean, blue is the warmest color. Mission Impossible, she had been all over the place. And so everything seemed to be lining up for this perfect Spectre, including Sam Mendes coming back as well. Now, one problem that you can tell right off the bat is this movie has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 writing credits to it. And while other Bond movies had maybe 3 or 4, 8 writing credits is a lot. It's a lot of people to have their hands in this thing to make it seem cohesive. And I got to tell you right off the bat, I think Spectre is it's the one out of this series that I can't rewatch over and over and over again. Followed closely by Quantum of Solace. Spectre is the least well reviewed of all of the Bond films in Daniel Craig's oeuvre, and
even lower than Quantum.
No,
even lower. Yeah, Quantum of Solace is at 65%. Spectre's at 63%.
Is it really?
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
is that's just critics, not audience review? I mean, I know audience review is not a great metric, but
I mean, I give audience review for movies like this a little bit more credit. I think for action movies, in my opinion.
In your opinion.
It's just such an easy system to game because people will review bomb stuff to get audience reviews up or down if they want, versus critical review is something that's controlled by Rotten Tomatoes, I believe, right? They have a list of critics they go by and they sort of assign a value to it.
The audience score is actually lower than the critic score on this one.
Oh,
61%.
Wow. So even if they did audience bomb it, that's because someone was so motivated by how bad they thought the movie was to organize an audience bomb.
So a couple things are, number one, in this movie's actually longer than Skyfall, JJ. It's 2 hours and 30 minutes. And boy, you can tell, right? Like,
yep. The last chunk of this movie, which takes place in like a giant bubble in the desert, is 3 times longer than it has to be.
Yeah. And so, and they underuse, so it turns out that Christoph Waltz was an orphan taken in by the Bond family. Or no, other way around. So Christoph Waltz's character was family took in Franz Oberhauser, the character's dad, took in James Bond after his parents had died and loved James more than Franz. And so his whole motivation was that he wasn't loved enough by his dad, and that it was thought that he had died in a skiing accident or an avalanche or something, I think. Am I correct on that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's his whole motivation. Also, we finally get like the henchman guy, because they had Dave Bautista, wrestler.
Yeah.
And, Guardians of the Galaxy fame, as like the henchman character who is like almost unbeatable in this one. So they went back to a lot of like the old school Bondiness stuff. Like it's like, I feel a little bit like this one, like I do about Quantum of Solace, though. It's like they hit their peak and they did everything right, and then they try and like meander into something that's immediately following that, and it doesn't necessarily work out that well for them.
Right. We get back to this Mr. White, right? So this Spectre is almost a continuation of Quantum of Solace, with Skyfall being like a tertiary type film where they go on this separate adventure, but now we're back to this main thing. The idea of this Mr. White character, and that's what Dr. Madeline Swan, Lea Seydoux' character, is. She's the daughter of that, and she's also a psychiatrist. And Christoph Waltz, they give. Okay, so do you remember the end of this movie, that monologue that he gives that's almost like 20 minutes long about computers?
What happened? He had blown, something had happened because he was drilling into James Bond's head.
Yeah.
Which
is bizarre.
Which he had him in a chair, and he's like, if I hit this nerve, you'll be able to stay alive, but in 20 minutes you'll be dead, but you'll have to witness everything. You're like, you'll lose all sense of this. Or it was really like long, drawn out and melodramatic. But so during this whole thing, he gets blown up in the thing and he loses an eye. Correct?
Yeah. Yep.
And then it's revealed that Franz Oberhoser died. What is it? Died in that avalanche. I changed my name after that. And then they give him one of the most iconic Bond villain, right? Because he becomes Blofeld, Hans Salvador Blofeld. But it doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me, I guess. The whole thing didn't make sense how they did that.
Yeah, it's this movie was attempting to do what Skyfall did, which is have some great fan service, but it just doesn't pay off the same way, and it doesn't have the things that you want to as part of it. And I think one of the aspects is we're all getting used to what the new normal is with Bond, right? We have our new Q, we have our new M, we've got Moneypenny. Okay, what's the next great Bond adventure he's going to go on? And it just doesn't get where it needs to be. And around the same time, I would argue a better Bond movie came out, a better non-Bond movie. We talked about how at the beginning of Daniel Craig's reign as Bond, they were going after the Bourne Identity as being one of the major influences. Well, a year before Spectre comes out, Kingsman: The Secret Service hits theaters, which just does gangbusters business, and it is a love letter to spy movies, and it's a little more over the top in the ways that you want to. It is like the halfway point between an actual James Bond movie and an Austin Powers movie, but that's what people wanted, right? They wanted this sort of adventure, and they wanted a great villain, and in that you had Samuel L. Jackson as this tech billionaire, and then all of a sudden Spectre comes out, and everyone goes, I kind of like what they did in Kingsman.
Kingsman was really good, number one. And I don't even think it was a year. I think it came out like 6 or 7 months beforehand. And it was more, I would say it was more old school James Bond than the old school James Bond they're trying to recreate, And I was trying to think of like where I'd seen that plot device before. Okay. Like how they, they basically like they bomb drop that this is this iconic character. And I was like, what the hell? Where have I seen that before? It was like, because I remember at the time feeling cheated. Like I just saw this and I had just seen it. Not so what year did Spectre come out, JJ? Would you say 2015?
2015.
Yep.
Okay. So here's where I'm going to like reference another kind of deal like I did with the X-Men, but it seemed an awful lot like Benedict Cumberbatch's like revelation that he was Khan in Star Trek Into Darkness, where you realize you're watching the Wrath of Khan all over again, just different, So like it was like I would have just much rather had like in that it worked in Star Trek, but in this, would you have not just rather known that was Blofeld from the beginning and not had this whole buildup? Like, it's almost a little like odd to me that like they also went with the idea that his whole motivation has been to like fuck with James Bond, basically.
Yep.
So he's created a worldwide organization to screw with James Bond. But when we are introduced to James Bond in Casino Royale, he's a nobody. He's a recently promoted 00. So in this small, I mean, how much time is supposed to have passed in all these movies at this point?
I mean, I feel like we're talking about maybe a year and a half, honestly, from the time Casino Royale hits to Spectre. It's not a long amount of time. Well, no, I guess in Skyfall, he supposedly has been off the grid for 6 months? So maybe a cumulative 3 years at the absolute most.
3 years at the absolute most. But then like he references like in the scene where you're introduced to Christoph Waltz and James Bond is up in the rafters. He references like, it's all been for you, James, like Vesper turning on you, this. It's all been just to mess with you. And you find out at the end, it's because his dad loved James Bond more than he loved, Christoph Waltz's character.
And
Right.
I didn't get a chance to rewatch Spectre recently, so remind me if this happens. But there's no flashback scene, right? Like you never see a scene where both of the kids are, about to play cricket or something, and Franz's dad is like, "Good boy, James. I love you, James." And Franz is like, "Father, I built a bomb." "Oh, you're not as good."
Well, I think again, just like Javier Bardem, I don't think we get Christoph Waltz without Inglourious Bastards. And I think there's kind of a trend there that we can almost guess, like obviously Rami Malek is coming up in No Time to Die, and he's having a moment right now. And I just wonder, like, what other villains on screen are we going to see that maybe we're going to see Josh Brolin because he was so good as Thanos. They're like, oh, we got to make Josh Brolin a Bond character.
Well, so we know nothing about, the trailer is very vague, and there might be more out there, but I try to do as little reading as possible. But when you start talking about No Time to Die, right? Like we don't know a whole lot about it. We just know it for sure is Daniel Craig's last Bond.
Right. Mm-hmm. To me, it looks like what they've set up in this one is he has decided to give MI6, he's decided to quit MI6. That's where we start at in No Time to Die, is he is no longer an agent. And I think this is his getting pulled back in movie. If I had to be a guessing man, or I would say like probably because a woman he loves dies. But that's just going off the fact that that's what they've done in the previous 25 films. Something's got to bring him back to the service. And I'm excited to see this. I remember after Skyfall, he said he's done with Bond, and then, Sam Mendes is going to do Spectre. Okay, I liked working with him. I'll come back from Spectre. And then he says, I'm done with Bond. And they're like, how about if we give you $75 million? And he's like, okay, well, I'll play Bond one more time. To me, let me say this. Are we done talking about Spectre? Have we hit like all the notes we need to hit in this movie?
What are the notes that I don't have a whole lot to say. So
you know what? I think the only thing I would add is that, do you think Spectre has any of the same effect from Skyfall that Quantum of Solace had from Casino Royale?
I think I had brought that up, I think, before you came on, or you just came back on. But I think that I really do. I think it is. I think they're finding it really hard to follow up these movies. Like they have the great one, and then the one after they try and like capitalize on that, but they just kind of fall short in a way.
Well, if that pattern continues to repeat, then that might mean that we can expect some good things from No Time to Die.
And now that we know that Hans Oberhauser, or little jealous Hans, is back as Blofeld in this movie, I think is really interesting. Because they're bringing the character back. Rami Malek is incredible. I haven't had time to sit down and watch all of Mr. Robot, but the stuff I've seen is absolutely fantastic. He is such a good actor.
Oh, so as a person who consumes media the way I do, you want to know what I think the biggest problem for the Daniel Craig Bond series is, in my opinion, is the fact that you need to have watched all of these to be able to enjoy what's going on in current movies. Like if you had never seen a Bond movie and went to go see No Time to Die, I think you would be very lost in aspects of the story. Whereas if you had never seen a Bond movie and you watched Her Majesty's Secret Service, you'd be fine. All you need to know is he's a spy.
So, and I think that's why maybe Daniel Craig realizes this too, that they have to wrap this, whatever this is, up. Because before they had the liberty of like James Bond is just this character and he's going to, it was always James Bond will return in, but there was never really a plot storyline. I think the only thing they held on to ever was that in Her Majesty's Secret Service, he married Diana Rigg's character. And then she died, and that became like a thing moving throughout the deal, but it was always a reference, but there was really no, it was kind of, we get to pick and choose what we were going to keep from previous movies moving into this movie. And now these movies truly are sequels to one another.
Yep.
So with it being a sequel, how far can you go? Do you want to make, it's not a Fast and the Furious franchise, right. And you can almost argue that Fast and the Furious has done a better job at sequels than the current James Bond series has.
It certainly made more of them.
Well, just
as far as the Daniel Craig goes. But I think you're right, because there's the thing too is that, you know, there seems like there's going to be a definite end to it at some point. James Bond is going to continue. I can't imagine a world where they just decide to stop making James Bond movies.
So I think me and JJ have talked a lot about this, like just back and forth, like over the last few months. But like, I think one of our big questions was like, where do they go from here? Right. Where, like, I mean, honestly, I'm okay with a break from James Bond from after this, like, to get it right. But where do they go from here? You know?
Yeah. So I'm going to pitch a couple of ideas I've got about it. Number one is I am sick and tired of computers being James Bond's most powerful villain. I feel like that's one of the things I like the least in Spectre is the fact that, like, yeah, it's all about intelligence now. It's all about intelligence. It's not about taking over this country. It's not about amassing this wealth. You know, we just want to control all the intelligence agencies so that we can do our stuff in the background. I'm sick and tired of that. I love the idea of a giant laser that's going to blow up, you know, a city and holding stuff for ransom. And the only way that old school mentality and tech is going to work, the pre-digital villainy, is if you take James Bond and you make it a period piece and you set the next couple Bond films in, let's say, the 50s or the early 60s. God, you know, could you imagine a James Bond series with Matthew Weiner from Mad Men being part of the artistic team on it and just really nailing that era? I go back and watch the Bond movies with Sean Connery, and I love them. I think they're great movies, and there's a lot of fun that gets sucked out of today's world. You know, if you have to live in a world where there's always a cell phone available, or you can be tracked by GPS with a microchip under your skin, this kind of stuff, you know, is great, but it also takes some of the fun away from the spy movies.
Well, there's a good argument, I think, that Phil's brought up to be made about taking a break too, because I'm looking at the release years for all of the James Bond movies right now. And if my math is correct, the single largest break between Bonds was the end of Timothy Dalton and the beginning of Pierce Brosnan, which was a 6-year break. And the closest one after that would be between Spectre and No Time to Die, which looks like it's a 5-year break. So, you know, not only taking a good long break for us all to kind of reset our taste buds here, but to then go, okay, we're going to take a good long break, and then we're going to find a James Bond recipe that is vastly different than the Daniel Craig recipe. Well, that could really help catapult it forward.
Why do we cherish? I mean, granted, they're well-made movies, but like, the Christian Bale Batman, especially the first two movies, because it had been for how long since we had seen a Batman movie, and now. Right. These things are getting pumped out and rebooted. Like the reboot starts like almost while the other movie's still in production, right? And so like they don't give us a chance to like yearn for these characters. And I think that that's part of it. Is like when we got Daniel Craig, like we weren't sure, but I'm almost positive they probably thought the same thing about Pierce Brosnan. I mean, or maybe they thought anybody can be better than Timothy Dalton. Although I disagree, and I actually like both those movies, but I mean, they weren't very well received. If they take some time and just like, I agree with JJ. I think it's hard. It's just hard to make good spy movies now, because like this style, because of the world we live in. And like,
the spy genre itself is a 1950s, 1960s creation, you know, and I think that you know, what we see now more is almost espionage more than anything. I would also say this. So Cubby Broccoli, aka Albert R. Broccoli, the guy who started making the James Bond movies and also made one of Phil and I's also favorite movies,
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, with probably the scariest villain outside of any Bond movie, with the child catcher. That guy was terrifying.
And Goldfinger was the other bad guy, the bum.
Yeah. But I think that we could see James Bond. Like, wouldn't it be amazing to see if Netflix had a chance at like a limited series James Bond, where you watched, like 10 episodes, each an hour long, put the production value in there that it deserves. I mean, I would love to see something like that as a possibility.
Here's what gets me to automatically buy a ticket even now for a new James Bond movie. If it's Bond, James Bond Jr., that's what I want to see, because I was huge into the James Bond Jr. cartoon. I want the mullet, I want the sneakers, and I want like all the little gadgets that went along with him, and just referring to his Uncle James. That's what I really want to see.
Well, that's where he learned the game, from his Uncle James. Also, he like his version of Q in James Bond Jr. always wore a lab coat. Like, even when they were on like vacation, he's always wearing a lab coat. Just because, animation is cheap.
When they're on the beach, it's a Hawaiian print lab coat. It was. So I don't know if either of you saw it, but I can't remember if it was a BBC show, but they had Fleming, the Man Who Would Be Bond.
Yeah.
Which was fantastic and takes place like in, I think, World War II.
Sure does.
Or just shortly thereafter. And it was all about, I'm not sure how true it is, but it's supposed to be about James Bond's, the Ian Fleming, the man who like wrote and like the James Bond books. It's supposed to be about like his influence, and he actually worked for, I think, British Secret Service like during the war, and there was a lot of that went into his writing, and I thought that was really good.
Dr. No is a good book. I've only read Dr. No of the Ian Fleming James Bond books, but it's actually a really good book.
How many?
And it's a short read too. Go ahead.
How many are actually books?
Good question. I'm going to Google that right now.
Okay, hold on. Let's see. Casino Royale, Live and Let Die, Moonraker, Diamonds Are Forever, From Russia with Love, The Diamond Smugglers, Dr. No, Goldeneye, For Your Eyes Only, Thunderball, The Spy Who Loved Me, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Thrilling Cities, You Can Only Live Twice, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, The Man with the Golden Gun, Octopussy, and The Living Daylights are all of his Bond novels and short stories.
Yeah, it looks like there's even ones that haven't been... either the name didn't carry over, like The Golden Ghost or The Diamond Smugglers, but that content might have made it in. So yeah, it looks like there's obviously a bunch of his books that have been adapted, but a bunch that haven't. And I wonder if that's something that they dive back into. I wouldn't mind seeing a new James Bond movie that's a period piece that does not take place in modern day. Well, even like something in like the 1800s or something.
I don't know about that one, but I'll go with you for the ride.
Well, at least that way they can go back to older technology. Like,
right. That's what I was saying, is like make it a period piece, set it in the 50s. And, I think that's the era that everyone wants for the gentleman spy character.
I mean, you brought it up earlier, but the Man from U.N.C.L.E. takes place around that time, correct?
Yeah. And it's friggin' phenomenal.
It is great. And yeah, I just don't know. I mean, like the two hardest things were like you had GoldenEye, which is right on the cusp of like a different technology age, obviously. We were talking more about satellite Star Wars type weapons in that one. But then it almost like all these movies inevitably, especially the last two Bonds, you're now they're at least being realistic with the technology. Like you're not trying to incorporate like having a laser beam that shoots ice from space, like in the Pierce Brosnan James Bonds, but it's almost just like it kind of gets to be a bore, if that makes sense.
That they keep amping up the action to a point that you just go, yeah, I know what's going to happen now, or I'm too numb from seeing all these explosions. Like, pick your explosions that he walks slowly away from. Don't have one in every single scene.
Right. And I mean, could you imagine a world where we didn't have the Cold War? Because for a long time, James Bond's mortal enemy was the Russians, because it was an easy, low-hanging fruit that everyone wanted to see James Bond take on, like a Russian in some way, shape, or form. But could you imagine a James Bond who is serving the British Army during World War II? That would be kind of cool.
I mean, I think... one of the things that's kind of, that's where I don't think that's true, though, because I think that Spectre, even from Dr. No, always existed, and they would use the Russians. They would play the Russians and the Americans off each other, so like they were like kind of like an auxiliary enemy, but the real enemy was always Spectre, right? I don't know. I guess I don't know. Like I don't know. A lot of this stuff, even Casino Royale, starts from a place of an actual piece of Fleming,
Right.
of his work, and it kind of goes out from there. Like, I don't know. I'm reading the synopsis for The Diamond Smugglers right now, and it doesn't look like it would make that great of a movie. So I'm just wondering, like, I don't want to ever see them remake Dr. No. You know what I mean? And I mean, the only reason the Casino Royale remake worked is because Peter Sellers was James Bond and Woody Allen was the villain. So, and it was famously bad. It wasn't good as an action movie, and it really wasn't that funny, except for it might have had the weirdest James Bond theme song.
Now, you guys may have mentioned this already, so correct me if I already have. But has there been any talk in this podcast about the Get Smart series?
No, in fact, and what I'd like to save that for is my plan is with these. The next one is we're going to break down the Pierce Brosnan series, and then we're going to do the Roger Moore, and then we're going to do Sean Connery, and then we're going to combine Timothy Dalton and George Lazenby
That makes sense.
into one, because there's only 3 movies. But then I also would like to do another one where we talk about all of the surrounding James Bond pieces. So everything from the video game to the cartoon series to the direct parodies like Get Smart, which I think is amazing. What Mel Brooks did with Get Smart is just genius.
Stands up to this day.
Get Smart. You also had, at the same time as James Bond was initially coming out, you had The Avengers.
Right. The old show.
You had The Saint. There's just a lot of stuff in that universe that kind of, and I think it was all made okay because James Bond was so successful.
Yeah, James Bond is the benchmark for any spy thriller. You know, you talk about how James Bond reinvented itself after the Bourne series came out. Well, the Bourne series was born from James Bond. You know, these are all in James Bond's shadow in a lot of cases.
Mission Impossible was legitimately the Americans' answer to the James Bond question.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. So, Phil, as we wrap up this podcast, I would like to know, of the Daniel Craig James Bond movies, which is your favorite?
I think I'm right there with you, but I'm reversed. My favorite, for all the reasons we've listed and probably talked about it the most, is Skyfall. But right, like a fingernail beneath that is Casino Royale. So I think I'm pretty sure it's Skyfall, but if you ask me tomorrow, it might be Casino Royale. I'm right there. I think they're both so good. I just think they really kind of hit their peak with all the reboot. Like, it was like the reboot started with Casino Royale, but it just was like perfected in Skyfall, if that makes sense.
Yep. So I think Skyfall to me is clearly the winner. Casino Royale comes in at number 2, but don't get me wrong, none of these are unwatchable. None of these are movies that I can't go back and enjoy at another time. So I am very, very, very excited for this new James Bond movie. And they would have to make some seriously bad choices right off the bat to lose me as an audience member in this new James Bond movie, No Time to Die.
Well, and Tucker brought up the point. If it's been every other movie, so we're kind of due for a good one. And if it is Daniel Craig's last one, I'm sure like we're going out with a bang.
Do we think he dies? Does he die at the end of that one?
I don't even want. I don't know. I kind of think so.
Yeah,
I don't know how you end it, because he'll he's like a Pacino in The Godfather.
Right. I think he either dies or he does a Christian Bale at the end of the Batman trilogy, where he kind of rides off into the sunset in some way, some metaphorical way, where it's like, yep, I am totally done. Not only am I Daniel Craig done, but this story
that we're doing, is done.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting, to say the very least. I think this has the potential to be just like a box office smash like the other ones are. But it'll be interesting because in a world that we're living in today with the pandemic and movies getting pushed, this may also be the least watched Bond movie in the theaters than any other Bond. This may find more life with people on their couch paying $40 for a single watch pay-per-view. We'll have to see what happens, but they're going to continue making. Bond is not going anywhere. This series will continue on forever and ever and ever. And I think that it'll launch further adventures for him as they go on too.
Really quick. Do you think, so to me, JJ, this is the movie I want to see in the theater. So I am willing to wait, even if it's till December or next January, to see this on the big screen. Is there a world where you would be okay seeing this at home with your Marcus bucket of popcorn you ordered through the mail?
To be honest, no. I would wonder if I could pull some strings to get into a movie theater. So like I've been really thinking about this a lot, honestly, of like, who do I know who would allow me to sit in a theater and I will rent it and I'll watch it in a pay-per-view style, but run it through the Dolby and watch it on the big screen, because I don't think that you get the full experience of almost any movie by watching it on your home television screen. You get a great experience, but a movie is meant to be seen on this giant screen, not on my phone.
I think for a few things, there's a few that I've got to the point where I can watch a lot of movies and be like, okay with watching them on my TV. But there's been a few times where I'm like, damn, I really wish I saw that in the theater. And I think James Bond is one of those like cinematic experiences that you need to like have the whole, like, you know, like the build up, like I'm going on opening day and like all the movie theater things with it to make it worth it.
Yeah, totally agree. Phil Lund, you've been an awesome guest, and we're going to have you back because we got a lot more Bond to talk about. We'll space them out over the next couple of months, but I'd like to get them all done before we get to that brand new No Time to Die. And I really appreciate you giving us some time today. This one went longer than I thought, but I am way into everything we talked about in every minute of this. So you have a good one, and we'll see you again.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.
A huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring this podcast. Folks, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, contact Natalie Deutsch today, because Natalie Deutsch is not only a previous podcast guest, she's somebody who's going to care enough to sell your property for top dollar. She's also going to find you the best price possible if you're purchasing a new home. Last year, on average, Natalie earned her clients $4,000 over list price on their homes and sold them faster than the market average. On average, Natalie's selling a home every 3.74 days. That's 2 homes a week. Those numbers don't lie. Find out why Natalie is one of the top agents in this entire market. Get a hold of her today, Natalie at HatchRealtyFM.com. You can also call 701-388-9338 or go on to livefargomoorhead.com. That's livefargomoorhead.com. Read all of her amazing reviews, and then listen to her episode of JJ Meets World. Thanks again to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes every week, you can donate to our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/JJ Meets World and donate today. Even as little as $1 a month can go a long way. Visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit up our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites the kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, go to linebenders.com, and you can find direct contact info for JJ. What if his name was Don Bond?